Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and my question is to the Premier. First, let me say that nothing that the Minister of Education has said here today will give Ontario families an ounce of assurance that schools will be open tomorrow. The government says they're being reasonable when it comes to their escalating attacks on our school system. But let's take stock for a moment of what they're offering our next generation. They're still planning to fire thousands of teachers. They're still planning to replace in-person instruction with risky, mandatory, Alabama-style learning, and they're still planning to cram more kids in fewer courses. Mr. Speaker, does this sound reasonable?
Question is addressed to the Premier.
Minister of Education.
Referred to the Minister of Education.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, what our government is focused on is investing in the front lines of education. We have increased expenditure this year. We're on track to spend $1.2 billion more than we did last year, Mr. Speaker. That is a proof positive that we care deeply about the success of our young people. Mr. Speaker, when it comes to what we're doing to keep kids in class, we have asked members opposite to stand with the government to look to third-party mediation, which worked with CUPE just 1 month ago. We've heard silence. What we've told parents, what we have told parents is that the mission of the government is to keep kids in class by using every tool in the toolkit, because parents should know with confidence that their kids should be in class tomorrow. What is regrettable is that there's not unanimity of purpose in the legislature opposing escalation. The silence seems to be almost implicit support for these approaches, which we oppose. Our government is going to continue to work hard 24/7 to get deals so we keep kids in class.
The supplementary question.
Mr. Speaker, I'm going to go back to the Premier. The Minister clearly needs a lesson in bargaining 101. You're supposed to go to the bargaining table to improve education, not make cuts that hurt kids. If this government cared about our students, they wouldn't be asking them to foot the bill for their tax cuts and their costly court cases. They wouldn't be jeopardizing graduation rates by cutting courses and pushing kids into online learning. And they wouldn't be targeting the very people who deliver our education. As the clock ticks toward job action, will the minister finally do the right thing? Premier, take these unreasonable cuts off the table and stop these attacks on our kids' future.
Minister of Education.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the member opposite speaks about data points. Will she agree that a $1.5 billion increase is too high when it comes to the offer we've proposed for educators, which is for $750 million? Mr. Speaker, the fundamental issue at the table is a lack of willingness to move off a $1.5 billion commitment to increase compensation. It is a fundamental contrast point at the table. The priority of this government and this Premier is to invest in education. Mr. Speaker, the 1% we're offering is $750 million, which is somewhat similar to the $700 million increase made at the height of Liberal spending under the former government. Mr. Speaker, we are committed to our kids. We're putting more money in math supports, more money in our special education, the highest levels in French, in mathematics support, in First Nations, in French language. Mr. Speaker, we're doing that because we believe in the potential of the young people in this province.